What is philosophy? Well, it isn't psychology. It's not just arguing. Philosophy doesn't mean just to deny everything or be skeptical about everything. But I do propose giving an outline or an approximate definition. And to do that, I'll offer three separate definitions, which together will give you an idea of what philosophy is. I mean, I really don't know what it is. I mean, who knows? Who can say? But, anyways, um, these three definitions are the collegiate, methodological, and attitudinal definitions of philosophy. Let's begin with the collegiate definition. According to this definition, philosophy, it's a discipline just like biology or chemistry, which studies very particular topics. So philosophers study topics like metaphysics, epistemology, ethics, philosophy of religion, aesthetics, philosophy of mind. All these are the topics, things that philosophers concentrate on, and these are the things you would see in a college curriculum, or if you were trying to take a course, these would be the type of classes that would be offered. And so this is the collegiate definition. We study these topics. In metaphysics, we look at things like the nature of being. We study time, causation. Epistemology attempts to ask questions about knowledge. We want to know, what is knowledge? What's the difference between knowledge and opinion? What constitutes a good reason? What constitutes justification? How do you know that you know? Do we have knowledge at all? These are epistemological questions. In ethics, we want to know what is right, what is wrong, what makes an action right or what makes an action wrong. Is anything right or wrong? Does rightness in itself or wrongness in itself exist? These are ethical questions. In logic, we study reasoning. We try to analyze what it is to reason well. Aesthetics, we look at beauty and art. So, in philosophy of mind, we look at the relationship between mind and body, the relationship between consciousness and the brain. These are issues of dualism. These maybe humans are just entirely material, but in any case, that's what we look at. In philosophy of language, we try to look at our use of words. How do they come to mean what they mean? What is meaning? And in philosophy of religion, we look at issues like, does God exist? Do religious claims have, are they either true or false? The problem of evil. We compare religions, see which are true, which are false, if that is possible. But all these are some of the topics that philosophers address, and so you might understand philosophy in terms of the issues that we discuss. Well, now there's also the methodological definition, and according to this definition, philosophy, it's thinking critically about questions that matter. And by thinking critically, I mean the use of certain tools. For example, arguments, counterexamples, thought experiments, hypotheses, definitions. All these are the tools that philosophers use to arrive at the conclusions or to come to truth. And so you might think of philosophy as just using these tools. So let me say a little bit about these tools. First, we start off with the argument. The argument is the heart and soul of philosophy. An argument is simply a set of premises which together entail a conclusion. In the notes, there's an example of one. We use arguments very. It's very common to use them, and this is what we're after. We always want to see what is the best argument for this view or that view. And even though every discipline in a sense uses arguments, philosophers make these arguments explicit, and it's so clear what we're trying to do. And so that's the first tool. Another tool is counterexamples. When a person puts forth some premise, we will try to show that premise is false by offering a counterexample. So, for example, if a person says that all humans are liars, that's the premise. The counterexample would be to find a single human who wasn't a liar. In that case, this example would be a counterexample to that initial premise and would thus show that initial premise was false. So that's counterexamples. Thought experiments are another important philosophical tool. Unlike other disciplines, which can create experiments where they control the variables, control the environment, and test some hypothesis, philosophers, being a primarily mental activity, cannot do that most of the times, and so we use thought experiments. In these cases, what we do is we create a situation, we account for all the relevant variables, and we use this hypothetical situation to motivate our intuitions about some premise. So here's an example of a thought experiment. Pretend Plato says that physics explains all of reality. So everything is physical, right? Then Socrates comes and says, no, consider this thought experiment. Pretend you had a scientist, call her Mary, who knew everything about physics. She knew everything, for example, about colors, the color red. She knew how the color red comes about, the wavelengths, all the different properties, all the chemistry involved with redness coming about. She knew every single fact. She wrote the textbook on redness. She knew everything. But she's colorblind. Okay, so she's never actually seen red. She knows all the facts. She's done all the research, got the PhD in redness, but never seen it. Now, suppose further that by some fortunate turn of events, she comes to acquire her ability to see color. And so now, for the first time, she sees redness. Now, the question is, did she learn something new? Socrates says, yes, she did learn something new. Plato says he agrees. Well, I guess she did learn something new. Now she knows what it's like to see redness. So, going back to the original point, physics does not explain all that there is. There's something beyond just the physical stuff in the world. There's also what it's like to see redness. Now, this is a thought experiment, right? We put together fictitious people, fictitious situations to motivate some intuition. Now, a non-philosopher might look at this and say, well, that's not possible, or that can't be done today. Well, that's beside the point. I mean, maybe sometime in the future, maybe when technology advances, our thought experiments will be possible. So maybe they're not possible today, but maybe tomorrow. That complaint doesn't really show that thought experiments are illegitimate. But in any case, you might think of philosophy in terms of these tools that we use: thought experiments, counterexamples, arguments, using definitions in a very precise way for the sake of clarification. This is another way of thinking of philosophy. Now, the last definition I propose is the attitudinal definition. On this view, philosophy is primarily an attitude where the person intensely desires to understand the most basic and foundational things of our world. Now, some people are content, for better or worse, with superficial thinking on these important matters. They'll take a look, but they won't spend too much time. In Plato's Republic, we read the story of a man who was asked a very philosophical question. What is justice? What is goodness? This is a very complicated question. And this man says, oh, it's this. And after receiving an objection, he says, well, I hand the argument over to this young man, and he's on his way. He didn't want to waste his time. He didn't want to engage in it, for whatever reason. And so he just didn't have the energy, the desire, the passion to get involved. But there's another character in the Republic, Glaucon, who has the endurance, the desire, the motivation. He has the cleverness to respond in dialogue with Socrates. This is the philosophical attitude. This person sees these fundamental issues, the topics that were alluded to earlier, and is not afraid or turned off by them. Instead, he will attempt to investigate them. He has the endurance to persevere even when coming across obstacles, the cleverness to use tools the philosophical tools and the right way to analyze it. This is the attitude of the philosopher, and this is the attitude we hope to exemplify in these courses. Now, to close, I just want to say a bit about the benefits of studying philosophy, the benefits of adopting this attitude, this philosophical attitude. First, philosophy, unlike other disciplines, it can stand the test of critical discussion. We can analyze ourselves. We have no problem analyzing our own disciplines and see if we're doing it right. See if it's going to lead to truth. And we analyze everything. We don't take anything as a given. Second, according to Plato, the philosopher has direct access to true reality, and this is distinct from other disciplines where they'll study, let's say, organisms or particular objects in this world. Philosophers, like Plato, recommend that we take our eyes off this world and look at the forms or the universal objects. Like, instead of looking at a particular zebra, he would have us look at zebra itself, and so we look at true reality. And so, rather than being distracted or misled by the things we see here on Earth, we access true reality, and you don't find that in other disciplines. So that's the second benefit. The third is the third benefit is that when we study philosophy, when we diligently pursue these foundational issues, we're able to remove any false ideas that may have crept into our worldview, since we are really critical, since we do not assume too many things, since we challenge even our most basic assumptions. We are at least given the opportunity to remove error and falsehoods that might exist at that foundational level. And so, by pursuing the philosophy, by having this attitude, we can eliminate those things and hopefully erect a better, more truthful worldview. Until next time.